In the 1970s, Volvo attempted to step beyond its familiar world of large and safety-focused cars. This led to the creation of the 300 series, a compact model intended to secure the brand a place in one of Europe's most competitive market segments. On paper, the project looked straightforward. In reality, it proved far more complex. Today's story is about the Volvo 300, its origins, its long production life, and its unexpected connection to the Dutch company DAFF. In the first half of the 1970s, compact hatchbacks began to gain popularity across Europe. Several factors contributed to this trend: the widespread shift to front-wheel drive, the 1973 oil crisis, and increasing congestion in European cities. Against this background, European premium manufacturers such as Mercedes-Benz and BMW stood apart, remaining committed to traditional layouts. Volvo found itself in a similar position, with a lineup largely made up of large sedans and wagons from the 140, 160, and 200 series. At the same time, engineers in Gothenburg understood that a more compact model would find its audience. This was also understood in the Netherlands. DAFF, known primarily for its trucks, already had experience in the passenger car segment. Its DAFF 600 is considered the world's first mass-produced car equipped with a continuously variable transmission. In 1970, development of a new model began in Eindhoven under the internal designation P900. 4 design proposals were prepared for what would become the DAFF 77. 2 Italian designs by Michelotti and Bertone, and 2 in-house concepts. In the end, the project by DAFF's own designer, John de Vries, was selected. DAFF also recognized that launching the project independently would be difficult and entered negotiations with Audi, BMW, and Volvo. The deal ultimately went in favor of the Swedes. In 1973, Volvo acquired a stake in DAFF's passenger car division, and by 1975, it had fully absorbed it, renaming the company Volvo Car BV. This move was important not only from a manufacturing perspective. Owning a plant in the Netherlands gave Volvo simplified access to the markets of the European Economic Community. Sweden itself was not a member at the time and would only join much later in 1995. The Volvo 343 was introduced on February 19, 1976. The car looked modern and, despite the brand's characteristic angular styling, fairly dynamic. This effect came from the large glass area, steeply raked windows, a forward-leaning front end, large headlights, and a small step at the rear. Formally, this made the body a liftback rather than a hatchback. At the same time, the compact Volvo stood out clearly from most B and C segment cars that were appearing one after another in the mid-1970s. First, it retained rear-wheel drive. Among compact cars of that era, this layout survived mainly in models such as the BMW E21. More important, however, was its transmission layout. The gearbox was mounted on the rear axle and connected to the engine by a drive shaft running inside a torque tube. This configuration is known as a transaxle. In the mid-1970s, only a handful of manufacturers used it. For example, Porsche on the front-engine Porsche 924, since placing the gearbox and final drive at the rear allowed for near-ideal weight distribution. Moreover, the transmission in the Volvo 343 was not a conventional one, but a continuously variable transmission. An alternative version was also offered, fitted with the M45 manual gearbox, borrowed from the Volvo 200 series. The suspension layout was equally unconventional. At the front, Volvo used independent McPherson struts, while at the rear, it employed a D-Dion axle with longitudinal single-leaf springs. In short, there was plenty here to attract the attention of potential buyers. Initially, the model was powered by a longitudinally mounted Renault Clion Fonte 1.4-liter engine, producing 71 horsepower. Familiar from numerous Renault models, this engine provided acceptable performance, a top speed of 145 kilometers per hour and a 0 to 100 kilometers per hour time of around 15 seconds. However, despite its favorable weight distribution, the Volvo 343 could not boast particularly sharp handling. The rack and pinion steering lacked power assistance and feedback, and it was paired with the leaf-sprung rear suspension. Even so, contemporary automotive journalists describe the Swedish Dutch hatchback as well-balanced overall, albeit not without compromises. Buyers initially reacted to the new model with restraint. Many were wary of the unusual transmission, especially since it was located where it wasn't supposed to be. Early production cars also suffered from quality issues, and the price was noticeably higher than that of direct competitors such as the Opel Kadett. With its compact model, Volvo had entered one of the most crowded and competitive market segments of the time. The situation was further complicated by the fact that Volvo initially offered only a three-door body. It was not until 1979 that the five-door Volvo 345 appeared. It proved to be far more practical, and the market responded to it much more favorably. In 1982, the 300 series underwent a facelift. The car received a redesigned front end, new bumpers, and an updated interior. Visually, it became less naive and better aligned with the aesthetics of the 1980s. At the same time, the naming system was revised. The three-door model was renamed from 343 to 340. The same designation was applied to the five-door version, 540, and the newly introduced four-door sedan became the 360. The engine lineup was expanded as well. The 2-liter Volvo B19A produced 90 horsepower, while the fuel-injected B19E delivered 115. The 360 GLT was offered exclusively with a 5-speed manual gearbox and could be identified by its front and rear spoilers. However, on the domestic market, it was priced higher than the base Volvo 240, which led many buyers, especially older ones, to favor the larger model. Over time, Volvo shifted its focus toward manual transmissions, as the Variator never became fully trouble-free. This decision paid off. If around 30,000 cars from the 300 series were sold in 1979, the following year sales nearly reached 70,000 units. The entry-level Volvo entered the new decade in strong shape, with refreshed styling, a more appealing interior, and a solid range of engines. Without growing significantly in size, it matured noticeably, conceptually resembling what later became known as the Baby Benz. In 1985, the range was further expanded with new engines. The 1.7-liter Renault B172K producing 82 horsepower, the 54 horsepower F8M diesel, and Volvo's own D16 diesel rated at 55 horsepower. Buyers were offered a broad choice in both output and fuel type. That same year, the model was updated once again, extracting the maximum possible from a design that was already about a decade old. In 1987, Volvo turned its attention to the increasingly important issue of reducing exhaust emissions. At the same time, power steering from the Volvo 480 was added to the options list, and the use of galvanized steel in the body structure was expanded. By that point, the 300 series was already more than 10 years old. In 1989, the new Volvo 440 and 460 were introduced, intended to replace the 300s on the production line. Even so, production of the 300 series continued alongside the newer 400 series. Demand remained steady, and the price was still lower than that of the more modern models. Production of the Volvo 360 ended in 1990, while the hatchback remained in production for one more year. The final car of the 300 series, a white Volvo 340, left the assembly line on March 13, 1991. In total, the model stayed in production for nearly 3 decades. For Volvo, such long production runs were more the rule than the exception, and despite its early teething problems, the compact model proved commercially successful. By the end of 1983, 100,000 units of the 300 series had already been produced, and in 1988, the 1 millionth car, a red example, was built and sent directly to the DAFF Museum in Eindhoven. Overall production reached 1.14 million vehicles, averaging around 76,000 units per year. Interestingly, the 300 series developed a strong following in the United Kingdom. It regularly appeared in the top 20 sales charts and was repeatedly the best-selling imported car, while on its home Swedish market, it never achieved comparable success. At the same time, the Volvo 300 was never officially sold in the United States. From the outset, the model was conceived as a compact European car, and North America was simply not considered during its development. The likely reason was that Volvo saw little chance of competing with Japanese manufacturers, who were rapidly expanding their presence in the US market at the time. The story of the Volvo 300 series clearly shows that a car's success is not always defined by radical innovation or fashionable solutions. The model began as a compromise project, inherited controversial engineering choices, and went through a period of market skepticism. The Volvo 300 never became a cult car and rarely appears on lists of automotive icons. Yet it is precisely cars like this that best reflect how the automotive industry actually works. Without major triumphs, without dramatic failures, but with clear logic and practical results. And perhaps this is its real significance, as an example of how even a far from obvious project can succeed if it is simply given enough time.